Hello and welcome to a data overview of Murdock Elementary, hosted by myself, Catherine Hickson, a fifth grade teacher here at Murdock. This presentation is an overview and analysis of milestone test scores for Murdock Elementary School's 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students in the 2016-2017, 2017-2018, and 2018-2019 school years. Demographic information of the student and teacher populations from these years is included as well. The purpose of this presentation is to share a clear and concise summary of student achievement at Murdock. The intended audience of the presentation is Murdock's faculty and staff and will be shared at the December 2020 staff meeting. Opportunities for dialogue regarding the presented data will be provided throughout the presentation. Staff members will be encouraged to discuss possible strategies to implement that might help lead towards improved learning for all groups of students. This graph represents the demographic data for the past 3 years for our entire student population. As you can see, Murdock's population has decreased slightly each year, with an overall decrease of 33 students since 2016. Murdock's student population is predominantly white, but students from other races and ethnicities are present. However, with the decrease in Murdock's overall population, the number of students in each of these subgroups has either decreased or plateaued over the past 3 years. It can also be observed that the student population is close to being evenly split between female and male students. This graph depicts the changes in different subgroups within our student population over the past 3 years. As you can see, the amount of students receiving free and reduced lunch remained the same from 2017 to 2018, but has since decreased. It is my opinion that this decrease is due to the reduced number of house bill slots that Murdock has available for children from other school districts, many of which come from lower economic statuses. The number of English language learners, as well as the number of students receiving special education services, have both remained fairly stable since 2016. Finally, the number of students classified as gifted saw an increase from 2016 to 2017, but a decrease from 2017 to 2018. Changes in rules or requirements for gifted eligibility from year to year may be the cause of these changes. This graph shows what percent of our students are absent 5 or less days, between 6 and 15 days, or greater than 16 days. The percentages have remained fairly consistent over the last 3 years, with no more than a 4% fluctuation from year to year in each category. This table is a compilation of all of the data we have just reviewed. Please take a moment to review the table and make note of any observations you are able to make. Before we move on, I would like you to consider the following question. As we have observed, Murdock's student population has decreased between each of the presented school years. If this pattern continues, what impact could this have on our students' achievement levels? Please take a moment to discuss this with your table mates. Now we will examine Murdock's teacher demographics over the past 3 years. Please note that administrators, specialists, and classified employees are not included in this representation. As you can see, Murdock's staff is made up of predominantly white females. The number of teachers and the remaining subgroups have remained fairly consistent over the past 3 years. Additionally, the total number of teachers at Murdock has remained about the same as well. This graph represents the years of experience of all kindergarten through 5th grade teachers at Murdock. Murdock's staff increased from 2017 to 2018, which resulted in an increase of teachers with less than 1 year of experience. However, the majority of teachers at Murdock have between 11 and 20 years of experience, which I believe has led to high quality instruction and a lower rate of teacher turnover. This table is a compilation of all of the data we have just reviewed. Please take a moment to review the table and make note of any observations you are able to make. Now we will turn our focus to the achievement data from standardized test scores from 2016 to 2019. As you know, Murdoch's 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders complete the Georgia Milestone End of Grade assessments at the conclusion of each school year. In this graph, you can see that the percentage of students scoring proficient or distinguished has increased every year in both ELA and math. This graph shows the percentage of students scoring proficient or distinguished each year in the areas of science and social studies. Please note that it is only 5th graders that complete these sections of the milestone. In the area of science, you can see that the percentage dropped from 2017 to 2018, but increased again in 2019. The percentages for social studies, on the other hand, have decreased each year, with the most drastic decrease of 11% occurring between 2017 and 2018. This decrease may be due to the change in the Georgia social studies standards between these years, which resulted in content knowledge gaps in many students as they transitioned from 4th to 5th grade. Now let's drill down the data. Murdoch's chosen focus area for the next school year is writing, so the following data will focus on ELA only. The ELA milestone assesses a combination of reading, writing, and language skills. As seen in the data, the percentage of students attaining the proficient or distinguished level in ELA has increased with each administration of the milestone EOG assessment. It can also be observed that Murdoch performs consistently higher than the district and state in ELA. We will see that data momentarily. Although 82% of students performed at the proficient or distinguished level on the most recent ELA assessment, achievement gaps are still present between some subgroups of students. Today, we will examine some comparisons of those different subgroups. As you view each comparison, consider what observations can be made and possible strategies that can be implemented as we work towards improvement. Here you can see how Murdoch students perform in comparison to students in the entire Cobb County School District and all of the Georgia public school system. Each year, Murdoch has had a higher number of students score proficient or distinguished on the ELA milestone assessment than both the district and the state. Murdoch also saw a 4% gain over all 3 years, while the school district saw only a 1% gain. Although Murdoch as a whole performs consistently high on the ELA milestone, that is not the case for all subgroups of Murdoch students. This graph contains a lot of information regarding all of those different subgroups within our population. I wanted to give you the big picture quickly, and then we will dive into these subgroups on the upcoming slides. From this point forward, we will focus only on the ELA milestone scores from the most recent 2018 to 2019 school year. First, let's compare the scores according to gender. As you can see, males have a slightly higher percentage of students performing at the beginning and developing levels. There is a 4% difference between the amount of males and females scoring at the proficient level, while 15% more of females are scoring at the distinguished level. Overall, 88% of females and 77% of males were proficient or distinguished in ELA. While a slight gap exists between both genders, it is not significant. What observations can be made for these subgroups? I noted that the percentage of females and males at each achievement level is comparable. There does not appear to be a significant achievement gap between female and male students. Second, let's compare the scores according to race and ethnicity. In the area of ELA, Asian students score the highest, with 51% of students at the distinguished level and 35% of students at the proficient level. White students also score high, with 39% distinguished and 46% proficient. While the Hispanic and Black populations have similar percentages of proficient students, only 32% of Hispanic students and 25% of Black students are distinguished. Overall, 86% of Asian students, 85% of white students, 72% of Hispanic students, and 71% of Black students were proficient or distinguished in ELA. What observations can be made for these subgroups? I noticed that the percentages of Asian and white students that scored proficient or distinguished are both higher than the percentages of Hispanic and Black students that score proficient or distinguished. There appears to be a moderate achievement gap between the Hispanic and Black populations and other races and ethnicities in our school. Next, let's compare the scores of students that are and are not economically disadvantaged. Notice that 85% of students that are not economically disadvantaged scored a level of proficient or distinguished on the ELA assessment. Of the students that are economically disadvantaged, only 61% scored at either of those levels. Additionally, while 39% of economically disadvantaged students scored in the beginning or developing ranges, only 15% of students that are not economically disadvantaged scored at those levels. What observations can be made for these subgroups? I noticed that the percentage of economically disadvantaged students that were proficient or distinguished in ELA is significantly lower than the percentage of those that are not economically disadvantaged. There appears to be an achievement gap between these two groups of students. Finally, let's compare the scores of students with and without disabilities. 52% of students with disabilities scored at the proficient or distinguished level compared to 86% of students without disabilities. Additionally, 48% of students with disabilities scored at the beginning or developing levels, which is significantly higher than the percentage of students without disabilities at those levels, which was 13%. What observations can be made for these subgroups? I noticed that the percentage of students with disabilities at the proficient or distinguished levels is significantly lower than the percentage of students without disabilities at those levels. There appears to be a significant achievement gap between these two groups of students. In conclusion, areas of weakness became apparent as I gathered and examined the data. Moderate to significant differences between the achievement levels on the Milestone ELA assessment can be identified based upon race and ethnicity, economic status, and ability. The widest and most significant achievement gap exists between students with and without disabilities. However, all students at Murdoch with disabilities are currently being served according to their individualized education plans to best support their academic and/or behavioral needs. Therefore, it is my opinion that Murdoch focus on decreasing the achievement gaps that exist between Hispanic and Black students and other races and ethnicities, as well as the achievement gap between students with and without economic disadvantages. Now that we have closely examined the data, I would like to discuss next steps. What can be done at each grade level to help close these achievement gaps? And how can we reach our lower performing students? Please discuss these questions as a table and be prepared to share one idea or strategy with the group.